museum back to life.
You know, people sit out on the front porch hoping people will come by.
Go forth and do good. It's insane. I have the most understanding wife in the world.
I treat everybody the same thing.
Oh, that's the other thing I love about Marietta. It's like a melting pot.
You are listening to Marietta Stories. Each week, veteran podcaster Bill Nowicki brings you the heartwarming, interesting, and fun stories from the people that make the community of Marietta, Georgia, a place to call home. Here's your host, Bill Nowicki.
All right, I got my friend Jerry King of J. King Images, but it's not all about images, is it, Jerry? You got a long and storied life story, don't you?
So where do you want me to start?
From the beginning, brother. Where did you grow up? Wait, let's, here we are in the Marietta Square. When was the last time you were here? You did a shot not too long ago.
Probably about a month.
Yeah, it's changed even since then. They're repaving, they're putting all kinds of stuff around the market. Have you been in the new Marietta Square Market?
No, I have not. In fact, I just got through playing musical chairs, trying to get here in parking spot.
But you made it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I'm about 5-10 minutes late.
No, that's all right. You're good. You're always good with me, Jerry. Now, tell me, I love your pictures, but I want to know about your story. I don't know if I know the whole thing. Where'd you grow up again?
I grew up in a small town named Corinth, Mississippi, back in 1970. I lived there up until about 88.
That's like blues country, isn't it?
It is. Blues, jazz. It's a little bit B.B. King, a little of the old stuff. Grew up listening to that.
What was your upbringing like?
Primarily raised by mom, stepfather, 4 siblings. And, yeah, that's pretty much it.
You got out of there when you were how old?
18. I joined the Army in May of 88. So right after high school, I enlisted and was there for about 10 years.
Now, why go in the Army and why not just go to college or do something like that?
Maybe my priorities weren't lined up at the time. I had a girlfriend, married right out of high school. She was pregnant at the time. So Army seemed like it was either that or a department store.
Oh, Lord. Do you want to say anything else about that, Jerry? You just want to skip over?
It was an impulse move.
But you did spend 9 years in there, so how did you get involved? You did paratrooper and all that kind of stuff. Yeah,
I did just shy of 10 years. 9 years, 10 months, and about 23 days, not that I'm counting. Spent some time all over, Fort Bliss, Korea. From Korea, I went to Desert Storm, got back to Fort Stewart, Georgia. Spent a few years there. Went to Schweinfurt, Germany. Spent some time in Wilflicken, Schweinfurt, before coming back with the 82nd Airborne.
Wow. What were you like before you joined the Army, and what were you like soon after? What did they teach you?
I think I got a lot of discipline. It was not good. What was like the low point right in the beginning, would you say? The low point? Small town Corinth, back in the 80s. There was a status quo. The majority ran the businesses, and you would grow up and you would end up working for your same kids you went to school with. So, really? Yeah, it's pretty much it's white, black. The white families pretty much own the majority of the wealth, the businesses and everything like that. And I honestly just didn't see myself growing up with the same kids and then working with those same kids again. And I just knew there was something else outside there.
I hear you. I can imagine Mississippi, it's stuck in its ways, right? And you didn't want to be stuck.
It is stuck in its ways, but looking back on it, there was racism, but I only experienced racism from the few encounters I had, being young at 8 when I had my first experience with the N-word. Some of my white friends seemed to be overprotective of, their families seemed to be overprotective of me when I was in circles, and I didn't realize why at the time, but looking back on it. But there's a big difference from then as opposed to now, because then I only had my own experiences to pull from. Now, because of the internet and social media, I have everyone's experience. So I think it was probably more prevalent back then, but it feels more prevalent now.
Interesting. I never thought of it that way. And it's interesting, too, that, you hear the N-word at that young age. And what was the reaction of the adults you were with?
I was alone. I remember I was walking on 5th Street and Macklemore at age 8 in 5th and Buchanan. I was walking in a truckload of teenagers, adults, drove by, yelled at me. That was the first time I had heard it. So I went home, and it hurt me, even though I didn't know what it meant. I knew it wasn't good, and I went home to my mom and was kind of crying, and she said, "What happened?" And I said, "Mom, they called me this," and she was just like, I'm sure she did the motherly thing at the time, consoled me. So that was my first encounter.
Sounds like it affected you in some ways, and then you probably saw the way the society was set up too, that it's like you're not breaking out of that little box they put you in.
No, I wasn't. I mean, there's just things that stand out. I remember in 10th grade, I loved English. I loved American Lit. Those were my favorite. Math, I hated it, but I loved anything that had to do with reading, and I wrote a short story, and I'll never forget my English teacher at the time. I'll keep her name out of it, but she said I copied it. There's no way I could have wrote that. So, there's no way I could have written that. So at the time, I took it as she was just accusing me of plagiarism. But as I got older, it was basically, I realized that it was because of who I wasn't capable of writing something like that.
Damn, that's some deep stuff. Now, tell me about your Army career. How did you get into the more scary and not just like storeroom clerk and stuff like that?
Too many John Wayne movies. And hearing some of the World War II veterans, I always held a deep respect for the World War II veterans, the Vietnam veterans. I just knew if I went into the Army or Marine Corps, I wanted to be combat arms. I didn't think of a skill or learning a trade to take out of it. I was like, if you're going to be in the military, you might as well be in combat arms. So my mom actually took me to the recruiting station. And you watch the little videos, and they show the videos, and you see the little guy jumping out of the airplane and crawling around and calling for artillery. And I said, I want to do that. And my mom was in there, and he got all these Army recruiters, and she yells out, "Baby, that's combat." And I just remember the Army recruiter saying, "Yes, ma'am, but it'll make a man out of him." And it did.
Yeah. What would you tell your the 18-year-old self today that you probably should have known then?
Go Air Force.
Yeah. Why is that?
Well, I was in Korea, and we'd actually went down and trained with some Air Force fellas, and we're in their dining facility. And first we experienced their barracks, and they actually had individual rooms. And I was like, what? There's not 4 of you in one room? And then we went down, and we were actually in their dining facility. It's not a chow hall, it's a dining facility when you go with the Air Force. And I remember getting ready to pick my tray up, and all the Air Force...
Dogs are getting pretty active around here. We've got dogs interacting. You're getting ready to pick up your tray?
I'm getting ready to pick up my tray, and the Air Force guys look at me like I'm stupid. And they're like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm picking my tray up. And they're like, no, we have someone that does that for you. So that's when I realized I probably should have went Air Force.
I didn't have that in the Navy either.
Well, you were on a submarine.
Yeah, that's true. We didn't even have trays, I don't think. Yeah. I don't even remember. Anyway, so what was your first time in combat like?
Desert Shield, the build-up for the invasion of Iraq, was going out to liberate Kuwait, defeat the Republican Guard, all that jargon. I came straight from Korea. I'd been in stateside for about 3 weeks before I got to Fort Stewart. My unit was already deployed. And then since I was a replacement, I went over to Saudi Arabia December 3rd. So how I got to combat. I was a forward observer, which is, we call it close air support. You're with the forward elements, close air support, indirect fire, artillery, mortars, you name it. Well, I had a certain skill that most forward observers didn't have. I knew how to work some digital devices that were mainly employed at upper echelons, like division and brigade level. So when I showed up as a replacement, division was like, hey, you're skilled with this. Maybe you want to stay here. And I was like, no, I want to do my job. I want to see action. So I get to brigade, and brigade finds out I have that same identifier, and they're like, hey, why don't you stay here? And I'm like, no, I want to go to the front line. I want to experience this. I get to battalion, same thing. I get to company level, then I'm attached to a platoon. It's February 24th, 1991. We are 9 hours into Iraq, and then that's when I first saw my first firefight, combat, indirect, direct fire. And the first thing that came to my mind was like, how the hell did I get from Corinth, Mississippi to here, and why didn't I take that position at division? So that was combat for me. So it was surreal. You always wonder. It's nothing like you've ever experienced, and you always
Nothing you can anticipate or.
you can't prepare for it. The movies, the movies don't. It's surreal, and you can't believe you're actually there.
Now, do you feel like bullets going by you and then hear the sound, or do you even hear the sound, or how does that?
I think initially you lose senses. It's like everything's in slow motion. You don't hear anything. You can see stuff. You can feel the heat, and then it seems like a few seconds into it, then all of a sudden everything the noise starts to filter in and everything like that. So,
Now, did that affect you to this day? That you still have like nightmares and things like that?
I have only, and I think I'm blessed, I think I've only had 2 incidents. I was in California in the desert training. This was a couple years after combat, or a year or so after combat. And I was looking down at the sand, and I lost my bearing, and for a moment thought I was back in that environment, so I freaked out. And recently, about 2 weeks ago, so this has been decades.
Yeah, that is recent.
And 2 weeks ago, I woke up in the middle of the night, and Tabitha is, holding me, saying, "You're okay, you're okay, you're okay." And I was like, for some reason, I went back there. But I'm not, it's just crazy.
Yeah. So then after the military, anything else you want to talk about the military? Why'd you decide to get out after 10?
Got after 10, I thought about doing selection. That was the only thing that was going to keep me in. I'd always been chasing this Army dream. You get into the Army and you think everyone is just perfect and, motivated, and you realize that not so much. They have their dregs of society too. And then you say, well, I know I'm going to go where the real Army is. I'm going to be a paratrooper. And then you're a paratrooper, and then you realize, okay, it's good. It's pretty high speed. I like this. I did more the first 6 months I was with 82nd Airborne than I did the previous 6 years of the military. It was just unbelievable. It was awesome. But I always thought I wanted more, so I thought about going to selection. Played with that idea for a minute, but I'd also got divorced. So I wanted to be closer to my kids, so I decided to get out.
So then you joined the police force.
Yeah, I went into law enforcement simply because there's nothing in civilian society that says jump out of planes and blow things up. So I went into law enforcement, DeKalb County, Georgia. I was there for about, I think, June of 98. Graduated in December 98. And about November of 2001, I made the SWAT team. In fact, September 11, 2001, that's my first day of tryouts, and we were sitting orientation. So yeah, and I said, well, if this is kicked off, I guess I've joined the right agency. So I spent about 11 years just shy of 11 years on the SWAT team. I was promoted to sergeant. Somewhere in there, I picked up photography, fell in love with it, and eventually resigned from the police department.
Now, what was it about photography that piqued your interest?
Nothing. It was an impulse buy. I always had an appreciation for photography. My mom worked for Kruger and Rengay, which they printed National Geographics and Avon catalogs and stuff. So she always got copies of National Geographics.
Some of the most beautiful images.
Oh yes,
I still remember that girl with the green eyes or whatever.
Yes, Afghan girl.
Afghan girl, yeah.
So I spent much time looking through magazines, flipping through that, and I had an appreciation. And also we had 50 years of time. I think it was 1986. It was 50 years of time. And I have that book to this day, and I appreciated it. But I never saw myself as taking photos. And it was April of 2011 when I went into Best Buy to buy an iPad 2. I couldn't convince the clerk, even through bribing him with an extra $50, to sell me one because they were on reserve. And on my way out, I ran into the Canon rep and ended up buying a camera.
How many years ago was that?
It's about close to eight.
Yeah. And we met probably 2.5 years, 3 years ago. And I remember seeing like the first images you did. I'm like, darn, these are good. And you're known for your headshots now, but what really stuck out to me was you captured like the person, not just a flashy, good-looking image. Now, does that come from your ability to kind of size up people, look through them, and how did that whole thing evolve?
got to go back and give credit to Mom. She always told me to appreciate people. She always saw people as the same. So I think going into the military, even though I was disciplined and everything like that, I always genuinely loved people. So I always liked to get to know people. I think what really triggered me and able to talk to people and get along with people was my time as a police officer. I had a lot of interaction, interviewing people, talking to people, consoling people.
Do you like going up to situations where you don't know what's going on and kind of noodling it out and looking at people? And tell me about a time where you kind of walked into a kind of crazy situation and was able to either diffuse it or figure out what was going on.
Wow.
You're dealing with mentally ill people, all kinds of stuff.
I was pulled up in an intersection and a station wagon pulled up beside me, and there was a guy sitting in the passenger seat.
And what are you in? Police?
I'm in a police car. And the guy is sitting in the passenger seat, and there's no one in the driver's seat. So he is actually steering with his left hand and driving with his left hand. So he looks at me nonchalantly and turns away. So I'm like, what's this guy doing? So I initiated a stop on him. I walked up to the passenger seat and I said, sir, how are you driving this vehicle? And he looks over in the driver's seat and he goes, do you see anyone over there? So apparently he was an habitual violator, and he was drunk. He was at the Waffle House, and his 80-year-old mother was taking too long, so he wanted to go back to the hotel. And while I'm on the traffic stop with him, his 80-year-old mother walks past the car, looks at him, and goes into the hotel room. So just little things like that just, pop to mind.
Did you enjoy that kind of work?
Believe it or not, it was fun. I enjoyed being a uniformed patrolman because every night was different. And you weren't arresting bad guys all the time. You were actually helping people, finding their possessions, helping them get home, buying clothes for a homeless guy, feeding a homeless. It was just authentic. I really loved working with people. Although I wanted to be on a SWAT team, I think the reason I ended up going SWAT was simply for the fact that I felt regret that I'd never went Special Forces. So I figured, well, that's, I'll go SWAT. SWAT made me jaded. I did over 1,800 operations.
That many?
18 over in the 11 years. 1,800 operations, from SWAT call-outs to no-knock warrants to vehicle takedowns, drug bust. So over 1,800 operations. And I became jaded because it wasn't like being uniform where I could always meet someone. I was always meeting the worst of the worst. And I think that's why I took to photography, because it was in that time, and I was like, wow, this is I'm connecting with people again. I'm actually seeing people, real people.
Yeah, and I've seen so many of your images. I love the one where the guy's like striking. I forget what he was doing, but he's like a metal worker or whatever.
Crazy Dave, yes.
Tell that story. I think how you set up a shot like that and pull off a shot, you can really see so many things, and it tells such a story in just looking at that image.
Well, the thing with Crazy Dave was that was not the first time I encountered him. I'd actually met him a year prior. I drove down to his smithy or whatever, and I asked him if I could photograph him. I heard things about him and stuff, and he goes, what are you doing here? I'm like, well, I heard about you and I wanted to photograph you. He says, why? I said, well, I'd just like to add you to my portfolio and give you the image, but I really think you'd connect. And he ignored me, and he kept walking around, and he just kept looking at me, and then eventually I said,
Crazy Dave.
So I said, you know what, I need to leave. I think I just need to get out of here. So fast forward another year, I'm in a convenience store, and he's in front of me buying a 6-pack of beer. And I said, hey, and he turns to me and he goes, hey, and I said, hey, you need to let me photograph you. And he goes, when do you want to do it? And I was like, how about right now? And he's like, yeah. And I went home, got my camera equipment, went to it, and that's it. I had him do his thing, so it wasn't staged. I just set my lights up around him, and I actually, to get that angle, I literally had to crawl underneath the steel table to shoot up at him to get the shot. So it took me about 10 minutes total to get that shot.
Now, you do so many special things with lighting and setting up the lights, and really you make the face really bright and the eyes really look cool. How does that, do you see it before you take the picture?
I see it. When you start out, you see something and you want to create it but somehow what you see.
That's all I'm saying. A lot of activity here in the Marietta Square. All right, I got Elizabeth Denny with me. Since we started Marietta Stories 3 years ago, Johnny Walker Realty has grown tremendously.
When I joined, I was the fourth agent besides Johnny and Carrie, so there were 6 of us. And now I believe there are 25 of us. So, yeah.
Man, somebody's got to cook for all those people when you have a company thing, don't you?
Thankfully, we have more cooks now, so it works out.
We got the Marietta Market at this square. We have one of the best farmers markets. Restaurants are great. There's lots to do around the square. Folks moved away from the square in the 80s. Now they're all coming back, and now's the time to work with Johnny Walker Realty. They're at 262 Church Street. You go to johnnywalkerrealty.com or call them up at
678-626-0403.
All right. So you say you see the shop before you take it.
I see it. Like I said earlier, initially you look at it, and when you start out, you can't convey what you see. But eventually you get so familiar with the technical that the technical's no longer there. It's just you see it and you're able to do it. That's why it's important to meet people and get to know people prior to the shot. Because when you get a stranger in front of you, you don't know them. You don't know if they're selling you a load of crap about, that's their smile. And now I've got to the point where I can look, that's fake. I can look at someone, that's fake. But
I love that story you told about I think it was an older lady that just wanted you to talk to her, was it?
Yeah. Wow. I had a client. She is older, getting back into the workplace, just getting back into her career. She's like 62 years old. She said she's not photogenic. She's never had a good picture. No one ever takes a good picture of her. She's always taking the pictures. So I spoke with her.
Was that on the phone or when she showed up?
That was on the phone. So I got a little.
So you knew you were going to have a challenge.
Well, there's a little bit of, I guess I got a little cocky because I'd just been on a roll. I haven't had a failure. And so when she showed up, we got some great shots, but it just wasn't the shot. And we spent 3 hours in there. And near the end, I was on the verge of like going, I might just have to give her money back, or give her the photos that we've done. But actually, because I didn't feel like I really gave her the service that she deserved, I was actually thinking about, let me give you an image, but also refund the money, because I just don't think I was on my game. She said to me, she goes, well, could I just look at your face while you take the pictures? And I was like, what? And she said, when I talked to you on the phone, your voice sounded so authentic, comforting. So she said she wanted to see my face because I had a kind face. And I was like, wow, I need to, okay. So that's how I got it.
That was Jerry King of jkingimages.com. Check him out. He's up in Woodstock, but he comes down, or you can go up to his studio up there. He does a fantastic job of capturing you for your headshot, or if you want to do something else. And I'll have a link to his website, and there's plenty to see. And I want to thank him for all the help he's given me, and he's a great entrepreneur, great friend, Jerry King. And check out Johnny Walker Realty and all the great things they're doing, johnnywalkerrealty.com. If you have a few moments, give me a review on the podcast app. It really helps the show get noticed. Hey, I'm going to be on CBS 46, May 3rd, Friday. Hopefully get it DVR'd so I can check it out, but it's going to be about my podcast journey and about all the great folks here in Marietta. So this is Bill Nowicki saying so long for Marietta Stories Podcast.